on a ride the last few days that Good morning, everyone. Let's start out by waving to one another and our friends on Zoom, and Zoomy friends can wave to us, and I'm never quite sure which way to wave. So, welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Lynchburg. Here we gather in freedom and friendship. Whoever you are, whatever your beliefs, whatever your age, and whomever you love, you are welcome here. As we work together for justice, compassion, and peace, we also acknowledge with humility that our building set on Monacan land. And their powwow, I guess, is on June 1st. So, my name is Betty Corbin. I have been serving as president of the congregation, and I will be turning that over to Stacy Yoder in a matter of days. He will be our new president on June 1st. If you're here for the first time, we are glad that you chose to be here this morning to participate in the service for this church community we love. We'd be happy to tell you more about our beliefs and our congregation. If you are here in the sanctuary and this is your first time, please stay afterwards in Drysdale Hall for snacks and coffee. Or if you're on Zoom, there is a host out there that will also be glad to fill in any details and answer questions that you might have. You can also find out more about us at our website at uulynchburg.org. There's also a virtual visitors card there you can complete so you can stay connected with us via emails and newsletters. And you may also want to join the Facebook group. At this point, we will light the chalice and start our service. And Dave, time to put the order of service up.
As we enter our time of worship, we light the flame of our chalice, saying these words together. May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, O Spirit of life. The opening words this morning were written by Dawn Cooley, Skjei. I have no idea. The diversity of the human species is astounding. The fact that we can gather together for common experience is nothing short of a miracle. Today, let us celebrate some of those differences. Let us celebrate those who worship best through music, for whom the Holy speaks through rhythm and harmony, pitch and meter. Let us celebrate the interpersonal worshiper who finds the sacred in relationships and in community. Let us celebrate those who worship best through the visual world, for whom the divine speaks through the aesthetics of a space. Let us celebrate the verbal and linguistic worshiper, for whom words and languages, stories and poetry are sacred sources of joy and revelation. Let us celebrate those to whom the divine might be found in logical reasoning, in mathematics, and through critical thinking. Let us celebrate the intrapersonal worshiper, those who experience the holy as they listen to the still, small voice within themselves. Let us celebrate those who worship best through their bodies, those whom the divine speaks through movement and physical action. And let us celebrate the naturalistic worshiper, for whom the sacred is found in plants and animals, mountains and valleys, deserts and forests, oceans and streams. Today, may we find a way to connect with the ultimate, each according to our own ways of understanding and experiencing the world. May we bring our whole lives to this worship service and celebrate the diversity among us. Please rise in body or spirit and join me in singing hymn number 338, I Seek the Spirit of a Child.
Good morning. I'd like to invite all the young ones and young at heart to join me down front, please. Gary, I can tell. All right, we have some other friends who are new today, so let's make some room. Great one. Good morning. There. All right. Good morning. So this morning we have a great book, and it's called Different, a Great Thing to Be. The pretty buds getting ready to bloom into some nice flowers. And look, I love this picture of the birds. See how they're all different?
And I picked my mom some flowers.
You picked your mom some flowers? I bet she loved those.
Which one my favorite?
Which one's your favorite? Nope, not right now.
Okay, I'll show you. This one.
I like it. They're all beautiful, but they're all different. All right, scoot closer in and sit next to me while I tell you the story of a friend named Macy. She can swim underwater,
It's her.
and she can balance on logs. She can whistle, almost. And she has a pet dog.
And Dog can whistle.
Can he? That's great. She reads books and jumps high like kangaroos do. She takes hip hop class and prefers to wear the color blue. She's a fun-loving kid, much like you and me, but she's also quite different, and that's a great thing to be. A bit small for her age, Macy doesn't talk much. She takes her time while others rush, rush, rush. She says, "Hi, what's your name?" to both strangers and friends, and sometimes sings on even after her favorite song ends. While Macy believes that different is grand, others at times don't understand. Some people stare rudely, and Macy's been told, "You don't belong here. You don't fit in our mold." In just a minute, okay? This kind of rejection can sting, it's true, but the thing about Macy and the thing about you is the brain in her head and the brave in her heart know her place in this world is not separate or apart. When those scared of different tried to keep Macy out, she just wouldn't give up. She wouldn't pout. She looked at the people on her left and her right, and with a great burst of courage, yelled with all her might, "Hey you, look at me. We're a lot alike, you see, but we're also each different," which is a great thing to be. Others around her realized Macy was right. They all watched in wonder as her spirit shone bright. At her school, at the park, at the dance studio, she brought the beauty of different to each place she would go. People learned to admire Macy's outlook on life. Some sameness is fine, but different brings light. With brave in their hearts and with Macy to guide, the different in each of us glowed from inside. Now it's your turn to create a safe space. Be fearless like Macy and choose to embrace all that you are so that others will see that different is truly a great thing to be. I liked this book for today because who can remember what we've been talking about this month? No? Nope, that was a good guess. Pluralism. And about how we're all different and we all follow different paths.
And I
Yeah, our friends follow different paths too, that's right. And so today, as we wrap up learning about pluralism, we're going to talk about how we can celebrate the things that make us different. Not just tolerate them or accept them, but truly celebrate in all the ways that we're different and find joy in that. So doesn't that sound fun? So we're going to head upstairs and do some art and some games, and we're ready to go. So David, you can turn our music on.
We sang with you, O keepers of the flame, our thoughts, our hopes, our love. In all that you do, O keepers of the flame, be strong, have courage, be true. We sang with you, O keepers of the flame, our thoughts, our hopes, our love. In all that you do, O keepers of the flame, be strong, have courage, be true.
The ministries of our church are supported by the love, talent, and efforts of our many volunteers and staff, as well as the monetary support of our members and friends. If you found this church to be of value in your life, then I invite you to be generous as our morning offering is freely given and gratefully received. If you're on Zoom, you can find instructions on how to contribute at the donate link under About Us at uulynchburg.org.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live.
We receive these monetary gifts along with the gifts of your time, work, and creativity, which also sustain our church. As together we give generously to support our congregation, let us also commit ourselves to a unity of spirit to make manifest a more just, peaceful, and loving world. It is our tradition to honor the whole of our lives, and so you're invited to share.
Recording in progress.
My first encounter with the solar eclipse occurred, I think it was in 1970, when I was in college at Wesleyan University. And Middletown, Connecticut was in the 90% or so range of totality. I was not prepared for the experience, either for viewing it or for photographing it, but it was an indelible experience. Fast forward to August 2017. I had just retired in April, and I'd begun following several YouTube channels featuring people owning and living in RVs, several of whom had traveled to view the eclipse of that year. My wife Sarah and I were contemplating getting a travel trailer and doing some traveling with it. I was thinking how neat it would be to be able to travel to view an eclipse. Fast forward again to early 2024. Michael Corbin mentioned after a church service that he and Betty were going to Mansfield, Ohio to see the eclipse. And when I expressed interest, he said we would be welcome to join. After checking with my wife, Sarah, and thinking about it for a couple of days, we made reservations for a site in the same campground that Michael had mentioned. As the date for the eclipse came closer, the situation did not look promising because of the weather, but we were determined to press ahead. We divided our travel into two segments. with a shorter distance to be traveled on our departure day, about 160 miles, and a longer distance, about 285 miles, on the second day. On the first day, Thursday, April 4th, we traveled through several rain showers with strong gusty winds, with the day ending with near freezing temperatures and snow flurries. This was at almost 3,000 feet in West Virginia. It was about the worst weather we had encountered in 6+ years of traveling with our trailer, and it was testing the limits of the capabilities of my truck. The following day, Friday the 5th, was cloudy and windy, but the roads were mostly dry. We seemed to have a strong headwind most of the day. When we arrived at our destination, we learned that the site we had reserved was underwater, but that the management had relocated us to a site on higher ground. After filling our onboard fresh water tank and managing to park our trailer on the very sloping site with a difficult entry, we then discovered that the electrical connection was not working. We contacted the emergency number, and that was the sheriff's department, who contacted the park rangers, who had someone on site within 15 minutes or so. Fortunately, one of the nearby sites, only one, did have a working electrical pedestal, and I had sufficient cable to reach it, and that site was not going to be occupied that first night. First thing in the morning, a maintenance person replaced the defective circuit breaker so we had our own power. This is West Virginia. The next slide, I think, is going to be the snow accumulation on the picnic table. Needless to say, I didn't think of this as an auspicious beginning to our journey. Mike and Betty and Barb and Truck also had their own site issues, but they were relocated to a different campground where Mike and Betty had full hookups. However, there was no more rain, and although the water level remained high, it was slowly receding, and the sky was gradually clearing more and more throughout the next 2 days, giving me hope we might actually see clear skies on Monday for the eclipse. On Monday, I was pleased to see that the thick cloud cover and even scattered clouds were gone. There was a thin layer of very high altitude clouds, but the sky was clearer than it had been since we began our trip. The plan was we would visit Mike and Betty's site shortly before the beginning of the eclipse process. Yeah, that's where we originally were scheduled to be.
Post sticking out of the middle.
Somewhere in that area. And so we'd get to their site shortly before the beginning of the process and stay through the end. This time I was prepared with cameras, tripods, a neutral density filter for photographing the sun, eclipse glasses, and even a pair of filters for cell phones. As the moon began occluding the sun, I was very busy with my camera, but I struggled with exposure settings and focusing because of the near vertical angle of the camera on top of the tripod. And I am not old enough to crouch down for a long period of time, peering up at the thing, trying to see the keys for focusing. Anyway, once I had begun to get good images, was able to relax a little though, I was able to think about what was actually going on, and had a moment when I was able to form an image of the Earth, Moon, and Sun as their particular alignments were creating the visual phenomenon I was seeing. This made me feel, on the one hand, powerful to be able to perceive the actual event, although perhaps with cheesy 1950s special effects. On the other hand, it made me feel very small to think that I'm a very small part of the population of a small planet, of a small sun, on the periphery of a run-of-the-mill galaxy among billions scattered throughout the universe. I was also reminded of the Beatles song, "The Fool on the Hill," where the chorus says, "But the fool on the hill sees the sun going down, and the eyes in his head see the world spinning round." Isn't that the challenge? To see what is real beyond what is immediately apparent on the surface?
Well, hello. I was fortunate enough to go with these fine folks to see the eclipse. Chuck had seen the eclipse in 2017, but I was working and I stayed home. So he really thought it was worthwhile. And it was kind of like the first time I'd be able to see, the only time I'd be able to see something of that magnitude in my life, unless I went to far away, like Greenland or something like that, which is, there's supposed to be one in next year, I think, but you got to go to Greenland or Spain. It was really nice to see Sarah Duvall. She was a member of our church, and so it was really great to catch up with her also. So we don't have a big fancy camper. Chuck has taken a Honda Odyssey van, and it's our stealth camper. You can get at Walmart a bed that just fits in the back, and he secured that down like it's a double futon. And he put solar panels on the top, and that can charge an electric blanket if we need it, and our phones, which of course we need, and then a microwave even. So we were going to eat a lot of bean burritos, but fortunately Betty brought food and was nice to feed us most of the time. We agreed to feed one meal, and there was a food truck, and we got sandwiches, and they were supposed to be fish sandwiches, and you'd think being next to water, but all that water, they would have been good, but they were not. So, you know, I was kind of impressed with, I've never been to a campsite before. One of the good things about our stealth van is if I beg hard enough, we could probably pull into a parking lot at a Holiday Inn, you know, and stay the night. But the big camper thing I had never done, and I was impressed with the way people kind of had decent boundaries. You know, people went to bed before 11 and let us sleep and those kind of things. So that was pretty nice. We also got there after the bad weather. The night before, apparently, Betty and Michael were there, and I guess you guys were there, or you were in West Virginia, but the water lines even froze. So it was below freezing for 5 hours or something. So we didn't have to try our electric blanket then. But it was very nice when we stayed the next night in time for just the night before the eclipse. We had a neighbor at the campsite, and he had been doing a bit of drinking, and he did that too. There was a point when Betty goes, "I smell skunk." And, you know, and then Michael or somebody else said, "Yeah, I smell skunk." And I said, that's pot. That's really what marijuana smells like now, and you just don't know it, you know, because if it was a skunk, and they almost didn't believe me, but, you know, it went away very quickly. And if you know anything about skunks, that doesn't happen, right? Skunks last a long time, usually when you smell them. So I'm glad it was just pot. But he comes out, and he had been drinking, and he starts calling, Michael had his hat on, and he starts calling Michael Jungle Larry. And Jungle Larry apparently is this television personality who is in Ohio, and he used to be on TV in the 60s. Some of us remember those days. And he had, you know, he introduced wild animals to the public. I didn't know that until I looked it up later. But he looks at Chuck, and Chuck's got this long white beard, and he starts calling Chuck Methuselah. And he's like, "Wow, man, you must be really old. You must be so old. You must have stories about Vietnam." And, you know, I don't have stories about Vietnam, and I'm older than Chuck. And actually, this guy was older than Chuck. So, you know, he just, he had a strange perspective on life. But that was kind of funny, and that gave us something to joke about. The spiritual part for me like I had said, was kind of like knowing I'd never going to be this close to home and be able to see this phenomena again. But is that the moon is 400 times smaller than the sun, but 400 times closer to Earth. And therefore, it's the right distance from Earth to fully block the sun during an eclipse. Other planets get between the sun and Earth, but they're little, and they're seen at a different perspective, and they'd just be a dot going across the sun, and you wouldn't even know it had happened. There are a bunch of theories about how the moon formed, and one of the most believable theories is that a big planet like the size of Mars hit Earth, and it bounced off. This chunk of rock bounced off and became the moon. Because it doesn't have the same kind of core as the Earth, but if it got baked a little bit, that would explain the core and things like that. And you know, this is the most believable one. If you look it up, NASA kind of believes that. And this was way before the dinosaurs and all that kind of stuff, if you believe there were, well, we won't get into that. Anyway, it was a really nice experience. I'm really glad the weather held out. And who knows, maybe I'll go to Greenland or Spain or something next year, but probably not. Thank you.
Well, Barbara covered some of mine. So for me, when we go someplace and we're towing, it's more about the getting there than the being there often. So mine starts off by saying, on the road with Jungle Larry.
I'll get you.
And when I first heard there was going to be a total eclipse this year, and that would be visible from Ohio, I said, So I started doing some looking at things, went out to NASA's site, as Barbara said. I also looked in the Farmer's Almanac, which is nice because it was very static. I didn't have to worry about internet connection. And I said, it's going to be very close to where Michael's brother lives. So okay, this is doable. And we had not traveled we didn't go anywhere in 2023. The farthest we got from home was Lewisburg, West Virginia, about 2.5 hours away, where we bought our brand new red pickup truck. And so this was the inaugural trip with the red pickup truck towing. It was also the inaugural trip with Michael's new hip, because that's why we didn't get many places in 2023, because we took turns having medical procedures, some planned, some not so planned, and you know, your turn to recover, my turn to recover, your turn to recover. It all ended well. And like Gary and Sarah, I-64 on Thursday was problematic. I am a very nervous rider. So I'm sitting on my hands, and I do pray, folks. They are very selfish prayers. They are, oh, if I can just get through this. Because there was sleet, hail, freezing rain, oh, and a burst of sunlight. Maybe we'll make it alive. So we roll in to Falling Water Campground. This is a nice, older, peaceful campground on a beautiful lake. It's run by the Church of God. And they had the usual campground rules +3. No alcohol, no cussing, and no smoking. Well, we don't smoke, no problem. Alcohol you can drink in private in your little camper. The cussing rule, we blew. And the way we blew it was that Michael, it was rainy, it was icky, so he didn't really want to go around the new truck after he had parked us. He stepped over the hitch, and he hasn't quite learned where his new hip goes. So he comes in, and I look, he was muddy, and he was bloody, but his pants weren't ripped. So with that, and $2.50, and a little bit of walking around in the miserable rain, I was able to find a laundromat where I was able to restore his clothing, and on we went. So now, of course, we know that travel is difficult. We know that Gary and Sarah are on the road and that Chuck and Barbara are coming, and I'm worried about Chuck and Barbara freezing to death, and I'm worried about how they're doing with their towing experience. And we're sitting at the last truck stop before you enter Ohio, and Michael's phone rings. It's our campground calling to say, oh, by the way, your space is underwater, which you saw Gary's pictures, where those utility poles were sticking up was where we were going to camp, down by the water, and the water had risen. So at that point, we said, yeah, we'll take a relocation because, we want to get there. We want to see our daughter, who is actually going to be in Ohio at the same time. So that's how day one went. Day two was better, and we got there, and we got settled in. So about the time our daughter switched out to go on to her in-laws, which was the main reason she was in Ohio, Barbara and Chuck rolled in. And so we started to get ready for our adventure with the sun. Well, one thing I noticed about our new site was the full hookup, which of course I loved, was that our neighbor had an unusual interest in Michael's hat and our Solo stove. And you saw a picture of Mike in the stove earlier. But on the actual day of it, we all gathered at our picnic table, and it was sort of the way you would do on a holiday. It reminded me of Memorial Day or any other time when you gather with friends and family around a picnic table to celebrate something that everyone has in common. And in this case, what we had in common, we had all gathered to look at this celestial event. And it was really pretty cool. So once the totality, we sat there and everybody was very patient waiting on the eclipse to happen, the totality. But I noticed afterwards, one of the things was that very soon everybody sort of lost interest as it started to reemerge. Kids went back to riding on their bicycles, people went back to drinking beer, doing whatever they were doing. And it was like, yeah, I guess we all understood that it was just a temporary thing. And it really did feel rather like the spell was broken and we had to re-enter normal life. And it took a while to do that. It really did. Well, after a couple more days in Ohio, we were the last to start home. So, of this band of merry people. And the first day of towing was great. And, falling or rippling waters hadn't been a bad campground, so we rolled back into it again. Smart people would not camp the second night where we had camped the first night because there was a little stream behind our trailer. And it rained a lot, and there was nowhere for the rain to go. So the rain rose up and flooded our campsite. And the first rain passed, and it wasn't too bad, and then the second rain came. So I fretted, I fumed, I wanted to move. And about 9 o'clock, the campground host, he shows up and offers us an opportunity to move to higher ground. And I was like, yes! So Michael put on the spare galoshes, also known as trash bags. He wades out, and he starts to tow us out. Well, I had chalked the wheels. A real no-no, according to Michael. One does not chalk the wheels of a trailer if you're remaining hitched up. So I'm hanging out the door, had enough sense to get on my knees, yelling, whoa, whoa. And Michael is continuing on, and we are steaming. Michael was probably steaming, I was steaming, and the chocks and tires were steaming. So finally we're getting stopped. I pulled out what was left of the chocks. We went on up to our higher ground site, and I will swear to this day that my Church of God host went like this, namaste, as he departed from me. So the next morning I got up before Michael did, and I went down to the previous night's scene of chaos, picked up the garbage bag boots and the dead chalk, found our former doormat about 60 feet down from the campsite, headed toward the duck pond, dumped those in the trash can, and had a little conversation with our next door neighbor who emerged from his trailer. And we were talking about how long we'd been married and about how couples sometimes have their differences. And he looked at me and he just said very quietly, you know, neither is right or wrong, just different. So we were almost home at that point. And so we pull out of our campsite 30 minutes after the big rig towing the little car had left. They hadn't come back. Good sign, we thought. So a few minutes down the road, within a couple of miles of our campsite, there was no road. It was underwater. It was under enough water that you couldn't see the pavement, and the distance was just a little bit more than the length of our rig and truck. And so Michael crawled in inch by inch, while two other drivers held back and watched us inch across the water. We had about 2 inches to spare. That's probably debatable with Michael. He'll tell you it was probably a foot. And no water got in the cabin, no water got in the truck, and home I went with Jungle Larry to resume normal life.
Yeah, so Gary wanted to know what kind of spiritual experience I had. Gary wanted to know what kind of spiritual experience I had, and I don't know. But around the campground, I rode Betty's bike around a little bit and saw a couple of campsites with big banners that said, "It's a bad day to be a beer." Oh, okay. And I mean, it's kind of obvious what they meant by that, but it kind of brought a bunch of existential questions to my mind, like, wow, do beers have good and bad days? And who are we to decide whether they're having a bad day or not? I don't know. And then I guess beer has living organisms in it, or maybe some of them do. So do they actually have consciousness to have good and bad days? And, when you drink them, well, that goes into your belly. And then Michael told me that, there are 10 times more bacteria cells in your body than there are human cells. Oh, wow, okay. So, but are the bacteria like conscious individually, or do they form like a collective consciousness, because, I know when you take history classes and all that, they say, well, America did this, and Japan did this, and Russia did this. Well, I didn't do it. I mean, I'm an American, but our government sure does plenty of things I disagree with. Did I do that? Well, I guess in a way I did, because I'm part of the collective. Anyway, all of these, deep spiritual questions are going through my head, and at the same time, there's a big freaking rock up in the sky blocking out the sun. So what's up with that, huh? Anyway, thanks.
Well, I had seen a partial eclipse before in 2017, so I kind of knew what to expect. And I got myself set up with the camera. We got really lucky. The clouds cleared in plenty of time for the eclipse. We had beautiful blue sky, as you saw from some of the photographs. I get my camera all set up and get the filter in place. You need a very deep neutral density filter. to take a photograph of the sun and actually see anything. And then there are the eclipse glasses you have to wear, because if you're going to look at the sun, you need a very deep neutral density filter to look through, lest you burn your eyes. And of course, between neutral density filter on the camera and neutral density filter on your eyes, to look into the camera and see what's going on, and you don't want to be using the viewfinder, you want to be using the little screen on the back of the camera. So it's glasses up, glasses down, glasses up, glasses down kind of thing. And as the eclipse started happening, I noticed the same effect I recall having seen in the partial eclipse in 2017. It got darker, it got a little cooler, shadows got a little weird. The colors shifted a little bit. If you know anything about the color temperature of the lighting, when the sun is shining directly on you, the color temperature is around 5,500 degrees Kelvin. If you go into the shadow, say behind a building, and the scene is lit by the blue sky, you get the color temperature of around 11,000 degrees Kelvin. It shifts blue. And when the sun is being blocked off, the color temperature just slowly shifts from 5,500 degrees upward to, excuse me, toward eventually 11,000 degrees because of you're being illuminated only by the sky. What I wasn't prepared for, and surprised the heck out of me, was that last 1% before totality. Things had gotten a bit darker. It was still kind of twilighty. And then totality happened, and within a few seconds, it got a lot darker where we were sitting because there was no direct sunshine at all. Now suddenly we were illuminated only by the sky near the horizon. So it was quite dark, but the horizon was glowing, and the sky turned strange colors because the clouds were being still illuminated by the sun, and we were seeing them from a new angle. Totality lasted 3.5 minutes, give or take a little. And as I looked around, I saw that it was dark, very much like it is just before it gets totally dark when night falls. And yet, I could still see silhouettes of people. I could still see some things around me, even though they were dark, because after all, we were being illuminated by the sky all around on the horizon. And of course, the moment that the sun started to clear the moon, the moon started to clear, the shadow edged past us, and suddenly it was twilight again. It was a very amazing experience to be there for those 3.5 minutes of totality. And I was so struck by it. I had, of course, my SLR aimed up at the sun. I was sufficiently blown away that I didn't think to pull out my cell phone and take a video of the surroundings during totality, a thing I now regret having missed. For what it's worth, you only have to wait about 18 months to see a new total eclipse, but you'll have to go to the eastern edge of Greenland. It's August 12th, 2026. You can go to Greenland. You can also go to the western shores of Iceland or northern Spain. And boy, am I tempted to make a little trip in 2026. Not with my camera? Well, no, not with my camper. I don't see any way to swim that across the ocean. And given the limited tourist resources in Greenland and the western edge of Iceland. If you're going to go to either of those places, I suggest you make your bookings now. I think that probably the best place to see it would be at sea, crossing the Atlantic Ocean somewhere. So buy your yacht now, get yourself trained up in sailing it, and get prepared to go to sea starting early August 2026. Oh, and that stream behind the camper wasn't a natural stream. It was a drainage ditch, and it drained basically the hillside behind us. So I noticed that when it rained hard, the water came up in that ditch very, very quickly, like within a couple of minutes. And in the lull between the rainstorms, the water went down very quickly, like within a couple of minutes. So I wasn't terribly worried that we were going to be washed away, no matter how hard it rained, because after all, the floor of the camper was 2 feet off the ground. But poor Betty was traumatized, and so we moved.
Thank you all. Please rise in body or spirit and join me in singing hymn number 343, A Fire Mist and a Planet. And this particular recording has some very interesting visuals along with it.
A fire mist and a planet, a crystal and a cell, a starfish and a saurian, and caves where ancients dwelt. The sense of law and beauty, a face turned from the sod. Some call it evolution, and others call it God.
Haze on the far horizon, the infinite tender sky, the ripe rich tents of cornfields and wild geese sailing high, and over high and lowland, the charm of goldenrod. Some people call it autumn, and others call it God. Like tides on crescent sea beach, when moons so new and thin, into our hearts our yearnings come welling, surging in. Come from the mystic ocean, whose rim no foot has trod. Some people call it longing, and others call it God. A century lone and frozen, a mother stored for her brood, and Socrates read hemlock, and Jesus on the rood, and millions who, though nameless, the straight hard pathway trod. Some call it consecration, and others call it God.
As our service comes to a close, we extinguish our chalice as we say these words together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Let's wave farewell to our co-religionists, roomies and zoomies. Our closing words this morning were written by Joseph Cleveland. May we hear the melody of life and find ourselves singing harmony. May we be open to the dissonances in the song of the land and its people, that we might be part of the world's urging toward justice, peace, and love. May we feel in our bones the rhythms of life and the land, and find ourselves dancing.